Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Pal Norte, A View to Migration in the Central American Northern Triangle with Global Ministries of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and the United Church of Christ, and our partners in the Northern Triangle region. My name is Becca. I am an associate for global advocacy and education with Global Ministries. And I want to let you know two important things today. We will have a translation available. Most of our panelists will be speaking in Spanish. If you are comfortable listening to Spanish, you don't need to do anything. If you would prefer to listen to the translation in English, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen. There is a globe icon that says interpretation. Click on the globe and choose English as your language. So if you want to hear the English translation of our panelists speaking in Spanish, you need to choose the interpretation function at the bottom of your screen and select English. And then we will have time for questions and answers of our panelists. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and put your questions in there as they arise for you. You can do it while our panelists are speaking or afterwards, whatever is most convenient for you. So I say welcome again, and I will turn it over to my colleague, the Reverend Angel Luis Rivera Agosto, our executive for Latin America and the Caribbean. Angel.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you, dear people, brothers and sisters, for your presence here in this webinar when we are we'll be traveling to the north, the Northern Triangle in Central America, and to see and to understand the root causes of migration from our partners' point of view. According to a model developed by the University of Texas at Austin Robert Krause Center for International Security and Law, an estimated 407,000 people on average left the Northern Triangle region of Central America annually from 2018 till 2021, with the majority bound for the United States. So those flows of people have varied from year to year, with an estimated of 691,000 people leaving the region in 2019, and an estimated 112,000 people leaving the region in 2020. So it is important for us to know how the people have been migrating from the Northern Triangle and how they have been encountering different situations in the border. The U.S. Border Patrol reported having 684,000 foreign nationals from the Northern Triangle at the U.S. Southwest border, including 309,000 Hondurans, 279 Guatemalans, and 96,000 Salvadorians. So they have been apprehending people under Title 8 of the U.S. Code of Immigration and expelling nearly 397,000 under Title 42 of the U.S. Code. So the use of this Title 42 has corresponded by an increase in recidivism, with repeated encounters accounting for more than 33% of total encounters in 2021, compared with about 13% prior to the pandemic. 17% have been unaccompanied children. 39% of those people were traveling with family members, and 45% of them were single adults. So root causes for migration could vary from country to country. Usually, it is attributed to political, socioeconomic conditions, security, and lack of governance in the countries that are part of the Northern Triangle. Natural disasters and climate change also provoke people to abandon their homes, looking for a better future for them and their families. The truth is that the Northern Triangle continues to be in our news front pages. The president of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, visited Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Belize and Cuba from May 5th to the 8th invited by the authorities of those countries. The Mexican president intended to monitor the progress of his development strategy to curb migration and, if necessary, renew his speech to address the root problems of this phenomenon. The agenda of the head of state was focused on cooperation for development with programs such as in the implementation of the social programs Sembrando Vida or Sowing Life and Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro or Youth Building for the Future for the countries of Central America. For example, the application of the Sembrando Vida program in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador could immediately retain 90,000 people in their countries and thereby reducing migratory flows. López Obrador has insisted on reproaching the administration of the US President, Joe Biden, for not having delivered the $4 billion that he offered to invest in the programs mentioned above. However, the Mexican president is looking for options to increase investment to trigger the region's social and economic development. He has also emphasized that the Central American countries and Mexico suffer from the same problems: poverty, inequality, frustration in the countryside, social disintegration, marginalization, and the historical denial of effective rights for the majority of the people. For López Obrador, it is impossible to face the migratory phenomenon only with more strict laws, walls, and police, but with well-being, security, and peace in the places of origin of the migrants. Now it is our task to hear the reality, not from the news, but by the people that are near the migrants in the three countries that we are now have in this webinar: Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So it is our task to hear the reality of what is happening in those countries from the testimony of Global Ministries partners who work daily with the phenomenon of migration and who best could guide us into how to accompany them in their ministry. So it is my pleasure to present three organizations related to Global Ministries dealing with the issue of migration. First, let me introduce you to the Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala. The Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala is composed by 7 Christian denominations and ecumenical organizations. It focuses on areas such as developing a pastoral culture of peace, creating conditions for empowering youth leadership, men, women, indigenous, and mestizo people, in churches and communities through the socio-theological reading of the gospel, leading formation with critical thinking and technical training to transform society, also women and gender issues programs, and the stewardship of creation programs. Its president, the Reverend Dr. Héctor Castañeda, will be the first speaker at this webinar. He has been a pastor for more than 40 years dealing with migrant communities in Guatemala as well as in the United States. Also, being the local pastor of the Evangelical Church San Juan Apostol, he has had the opportunity to accompany families and to develop, along with the council, the accompaniment of those who suffer from dispossession and injustice in Guatemala. Reverend Dr. Castañeda, welcome. And please share with us the situation of the country regarding migration as well as the alternatives as worked by the council. You will have 10 minutes to do so. Thank you very much. Bienvenido, Pastor.
Muchas gracias, Ángel Luis.
Thank you, Ángel Luis. And greetings to everyone who are participating, the panelists, and everyone else. I believe that Ángel Luis' introduction is relevant to what I want to present. I like to stick to the framework that Global Ministries gave us to keep the presentation within the 10-minute limit. I want to start by reaffirming that the forced displacement of women, men, children, and families from the reality of Guatemala, it's unstoppable. during the past 2 years, the reality of this country grew in a negative way. The the economic situation, political, cultural, is at its lowest levels. Corruption is a sign of the times among all of us. It's impossible for all of these people who decide to migrate towards the United States. It's impossible for them to stop because here in Guatemala, they have no other option. And that's a painful truth and a highly troublesome truth on all levels. As well, the idea is that these people who decided to migrate following the so-called American dream, the American dream is something used by the press. There is no such a thing as American dream. What these people need is to eat. They want a better future for their families. They want dignity for their families. According to various organizations, there are between 3 and 4 million Guatemalans that do not have a legal status in the United States. These people send money back to Guatemala that stand around between 8 and or 11 billion dollars, practically the second largest source of income of Guatemala, much more than the fruit, the banana, the coffee, the sugar, and other things. What would happen if all of them are deported back to Guatemala? That's something we always need to think about. And now the proposal by President López Obrador, I think it's viable for Mexico. For that part of Mesoamerica, Yucatan, Tabasco, Oaxaca, and that's where these migrants would be stopped. Which, if we talk about dreams, the American dream does not exist for them, but the Mexican dream could exist, which is not the best, but at least they will find work and food. What do we do in Guatemala? First, to analyze this phenomenon. We do very little or nothing. The Congress has a commission of migrants that is really only stuck on speeches and churches in particular, the ones associated with the Ecumenical Council of Guatemala. They have small programs that in some way they alleviate the desperation or the sense of loss that these families have. We find in most cases powerless to give a proper answer to the problem. We can accompany people via the church. We can give them some food, some shelter for a few days, because we do not have the resources to do more. In 2002, I had the opportunity of being in Denver, Colorado. I was invited as a visiting professor, and I had the chance to to connect with 40 Guatemalan migrants. I made a proposal to the superintendent of the United Methodist Church in Denver, but we never got an answer. From the Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala, we believe there is a program that should be implemented and supported, a program that involves churches in Guatemala, in Mexico, and in the United States. The reality of these migrants, it's unknown by the majority of officials and the public in general. There's a romanticized idea of migration, but there are statistics, plenty of statistics and plenty of investigations that are very superficial. I speak about from the Guatemalan reality, and I think it's impossible to stop this forced displacement. They don't have another option, and it's dramatic. They do not have another option. But they cannot just stay without anything. They need a more serious, more effective help. For some of them, so that some of them may not even do the trip. And for those who made the decision and will leave, opposing any propaganda or marketing campaign or advice, they will go. How can we help them? How can we accompany them from the moment they leave Guatemala through Mexico and the moment they reach the United States? And I believe that Christian churches, they have an enormous opportunity to much more effectively serve these groups if we had a common program to help them, but help them for real. There is no other way for them, because here the political, economic, the situation in violence, it's an everyday thing, and I want to reach the end. Vice President Kamala Harris came to this country, to Guatemala, and she spent all her time in cocktail parties and empty speeches, the same speech as always. Every US vice president that has come to Guatemala from the time of Nixon in 1955, what they have showed is a complete ignorance about the reality of Latin America. But in our specific case, in Guatemala, Harris, she offered $1.2 billion for the Northern Triangle, which I find to be a fatal euphemism. And I was shocked a few days ago when I learned that the US Congress approved $40 billion for Ukraine. We need a program, a real effective program to help migrants. And the United States needs to participate as all of us do. And I'm not just talking about our governments or institutions that like to investigate the problem. I would care more if churches got involved in this. Because if not, this attempt is gonna be lost. It's gonna be like so many others that were condemned to failure from the start. Like many of these programs that are supposedly helping migrants, although we never see a positive result. I think this is where I will stop, brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Pastor Castañeda, and thank you for lifting up in a more formal way what we have been working through the Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala. And here we have connected as a participant of this webinar, the executive director of the Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala, my dear brother Brian Alvarado. We have been working an initiative tracking migrants from their departure from Guatemala, traveling through Mexico and to the south of the border of the US, and also tracking down the deportees from the US using something as simple as cell phones, you know, a cell phone network that we have. And here we have Sharon Stanley, that is one of our colleagues working with migrations in the Disciples of Christ in the US. I have received calls from Sharon telling us about some deportee coming from the US. And the Ecumenical Council has been very valuable in its effort to accompany those migrants up until their hometown in Guatemala. So I think that we as US churches need to be very much aware of the people that are deported from the US, how to accompany them to get into their loved ones in their countries of origin. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sharon, for this wonderful effort that we have had the opportunity to work together. So thank you, Dr. Castañeda, and let's then move into Honduras. The Christian Commission for Development, or CCD, of Honduras was founded in 1982 by a group of Christians working with refugees from El Salvador who fled persecution in their countries to Honduras, settling in refugee camps along the Honduras-El Salvador border. From the initial work of human rights service and pastoral compassion, CCD's ministry expanded into marginalized areas of Honduras. During all of these years, CCD has been able to constantly evaluate and reflect on their work concerning the environment, which allowed them to make the necessary changes to meet the needs of changing realities. CCD stands committed to the impoverished majority, given its mission to work to bring the kingdom of God closer to the Honduran people and Central America. Sister Nancy Romero has been working for more than 20 years in the organization, and for 12 years, she has served as its executive director. Sister Nancy, welcome, and please share with us the situation of the country regarding migration, as well as the alternatives as worked by the CCD. You will have 10 minutes to do so. Thank you very much. Gracias, hermana querida.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Como le mencionó el pastor, mi nombre es Nancy Romero. Soy la directora ejecutiva de la Comisión Cristiana de Desarrollo.
I am the executive director of the Christian Commission.
It's a non-governmental,
non-profit organization that we're supporting.
For 9 years, we've been
development
programs
in the local and regional
development processes in Honduras. For us,
it's been
a large challenge.
It's been a
to support
challenge
these programs,
to support these programs, in particular to the
issue of migration. We've been
Ours has been
one of the organizations that has supported
the attempts to stop the forced displacements of people, but reality in Honduras is different. So I brought a presentation, as a shorter presentation, and well, Pastor, we will give a report about migration in the Northern Triangle in Honduras. In the current context of our communities, migration, the migration phenomenon to the United States has increased over the last few years, and the police, the repressive politics of the U.S. is constant against the migrants. And everything that has caused the difficulties and the precariousness that Hondurans live under has pushed them to leave the so-called migrant caravans. and including hundreds of unaccompanied children, because many families, they send their children with coyotes, people with disabilities, older people, they also look for these very dangerous migrant caravans. And this, on top of all this, is the mistreatment by migrant authorities. They are often imprisoned in these cages. We're talking about some caravans. The first caravans were between 6,000 and 8,000 people in these migrant caravans. And this shows the civilization crisis and the problem with human rights.
What are the factors that push people to leave their places of origin in a forced migration? The first and greatest factor is organized crime. Honduras has the third highest homicide rate in Latin America. Only Jamaica and Venezuela have a higher one. We're talking about 11 killings per day. And in just the first semester of 2022, the murder rate has grown over 4%. We're talking about over 1,500 murders in just the first few months of 2022. What are some of the other issues? Narco trafficking. People have to leave. They want to start a business, but because organized crime extorts money from them, they have to close it because they can't work. Otherwise, they're just working for these gangs. And I'm just not talking about one area. I'm also talking about the transportation system. You can get robbed 2 or 3 times on the way to work. So you owe money to different gangs. That leads many people to close their businesses. It's hard to tell people not to travel when they're facing the kinds of dangers. The same situation of crisis, of danger, forces people to migrate. And people are migrating to the United States, but also to Spain. One of the other factors is family reunification. There's many families that have been separated now for several years. Maybe the father left, maybe the mother left. People want to see their children, so that pushes more people to migrate, to meet outside of the country. It's also dangerous because it means that minors are traveling, often in the hands of coyotes, traveling dangerously to the United States. Another factor are the consequences that have been left by COVID-19. Many businesses have been closed. Many people lost their businesses. So they had to become part of the caravans. From 600 to 1,000 people leave daily from Honduras towards the United States. These are figures that come from the organizations that protect Honduran migrants. Every 24 hours, the United States is receiving 20,000 migrants from several different countries, but most of those come from Central America. And within those from Central America, the Hondurans play a huge role. It's also really important to mention some of the climate issues that are contributing to this. For example, Hurricane Eta and Hurricane Iota created a disaster for Hondurans. There's also a lack of work opportunities. We've lived for 12 years under corrupt regimes. This has affected international cooperation. We have one of the highest indexes of corruption. We have a very high rate of unemployment. So people have to move to look for more opportunities to be able to provide for their families. Next, please. The characteristics of irregular migration in the region. This is a reality in all three countries, particularly in Guatemala and El Salvador, in which people reach out to drug traffickers or human traffickers to move them. These are who we call coyotes. Just 3 days ago, the news of Honduran migrants was of 3 Honduran migrants who died on the coast of Veracruz, Mexico, in a small boat that capsized. But also people are kidnapped often in Mexico because the so-called coyotes abandoned them on the route. This is something that all migrants will tell you about. Those who return to Honduras, those who perhaps been deported, talk about all the odyssey that they went through to get to the so-called American dream. We're going to watch a short video now about the latest caravans that have set off towards the United States. At least 10,000 Hondurans left at night in the midst of the COVID epidemic to head towards the United States. These people confront enormous challenges, leaving the country, looking for the American dream. We're trying to tell people that leaving in a migrant caravan is no guarantee that you'll arrive to where you're headed. And very small percentage of those who arrive to the United States are able to get asylum status.
Desde la gran terminal de buses de San Pedro Sula en el norte de Honduras hacia Guatemala
leaving the terminal of San Pedro Sula in the north of Honduras, thousands of Hondurans headed for the Guatemalan border.
Eso hay que irlo desmitificando, porque quienes tenemos parientes allá sabemos.
Those of us who have family in the United States know that most of the people who arrive to the United States have nothing good happen to them for the first 5 years. To confront this tide of migrants, there's been a set of new policies, policing policies, to prevent people from leaving. News from Tegucigalpa, Honduras. This is a reality of our countries. The head from the Northern Triangle, as Hector Castaneda told us. Those of us who have been part of this for many years, who've been concerned about this, recently we haven't received the support that would enable us to continue our work on this issue. Please, the next slide. Before I start to tell you about CCD has offered to our country people to reduce the index of migration, I wanted to mention that as the Pastor Hector Castaneda said, some agencies that work on the issue of Northern Triangle, the USAID does not provide funds that we can access. I imagine that USAID has its own local NGOs that they support, but if it were not for the support of God and Christians who support us, we can't continue to do this work. How has the CCD worked to reduce migration?
CCD ha trabajado en la última década en la prevención.
First off, we've worked with young people and with women to so that this part of the population is able to establish themselves with certain vocational skills, technical skills, for example, tailoring, dessert making, hairdressing. So we have workshops. We have these different areas where we're able to teach people, but also they're able to gain values such as self-esteem. We also work on issues such as welding, such as automobile mechanics, English, sewing. And what's very important is that all of these workshops have an ethical, moral education as well that has to do with building self-esteem in people. So as a counterpart, as an institutional counterpart, we've formalized alliances, strategic alliances with international organizations such as Global Ministries. We have more than 10 years working on this, which the Lord has blessed us to work with Global Ministries. We also work with Cord Aid and ECO of the Netherlands. We've been able to train 5,000 young people in two different municipalities, several different municipalities of the dry corridor of Honduras. The CCD has also trained more than 2,000 representatives of 250 rural credit groups, which are people who come together to decide to create a credit option to support the production of one or another issue. For example, a group of women who sew, women and men who are producing fish, who are producing bees and honey. So there's these different rural credit schemes of people who come together and organize. This is 250 that we've been able to train in issues of accounting, credits and organization, business administration, so these people can improve their living conditions. Next, please. In the same way, this product would not have been possible without the support from Global Ministries and the Disciples of Churches and the Unity of Christ Church. It's really been a blessing that we have the support of Global Ministries. We really couldn't do this without your support, and we're very, very thankful. To close, what are the next steps? In order to continue supporting migrants in the situation of migration, we need to continue to work together with relevant actors to improve living conditions of the communities in the communities of origin, influence people's intentions to migrate. Recently, with the Vice Presidency of our country, we've been able to talk about working on bordering municipalities' environmental issues. It's a new program. This is a tri-national agreement between Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. So it's not that the government is going to give us all of the resources, but rather that the government will support and we will also look for resources in order to improve the living conditions of people who live on the borders in order to reduce the migration from our country. They say that around 6,000 people who live in extreme poverty.
Nosotros buscamos establecer canales de atención para las personas migrantes retornadas.
These people who live in extreme poverty, we look for channels and ways to reach them, because more than reducing the rate of migration, we want to support comprehensive support for people who would be migrants. Because we want people to decide to their communities of origin, return there and stay there. We want to support people with projects, with programs that allow them to stay where they're from, that allow them to have hope for their lives, so they don't have desires to leave their country and travel. Thank you so much. This has been a challenge for us, and we hope to have the support of you, your national and international cooperation on this issue. The situation that our country people are living through due to the lack of opportunity in our country.
To promote the development in the countries in whole Latin America and the Caribbean, but specifically in Central America, the access to credit. How can we provide for soft loans? How can we provide for resources? Not handouts, but to provide financial tools so our communities could develop and gain self-sustainability. I have been a witness seeing the rural banks in Honduras, rural banks in Ecuador, and in some other countries in Latin America, and how communities can flourish because of those soft loans and access to credit. Thank you very much, Nancy. And we continue our webinar hearing from the Salvadorian Lutheran Synod. That synod started as a North American mission in the 1950s, and today is a vital Central American church. El Salvador is a country with 12-year civil war, claimed an estimated of 75,000 lives. Speaking out in opposition to the government can be a serious crime. So the church has long believed that service and advocacy on behalf of the poor are fundamental to the church's mission. So the synod focuses on 3 basic human rights in the aftermath of the civil war and ongoing human rights violations in El Salvador. The Truth, Justice, and Peace Project is working for the people's right to the truth, the right to justice, and the right to amends regarding the events during the civil war and the continued torture, execution, and disappearance of people even today. One of its main ministries is the Pastoral of Migrants. Its executive director is the Reverend Blanca Irma Rodriguez, which has been leading this ministry for the past 25 years. She has 20 years of pastoral experience, and she now will share with us the work of that pastoral. Pastor Blanca Irma, welcome, and please share with us the situation of El Salvador regarding migration, as well as the alternatives as worked by the Synod. You will have 10 minutes to do so. Thank you very much. Gracias, Pastora Blanca Irma.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I want to thank Dr. Hector Castaneda and Nancy Romero for the excellent expositions.
Porque ya ese sustento, ese fundamento ya está ahí colocado.
Because the base that you've set forward is important, and I'm going to work from there. We're a Lutheran church in El Salvador. And we've been working since the declaration of a humanitarian crisis. We base our work on the concept that migration is a right. Migrating is a right. And based on that, we work with the population that is in a forced displacement as a result of violence. And the right for people to return. We also start on the basis that migration is nothing new. It's basic to human history, and it's the conditions that invite us to migrate, because Earth is inherited, God made
hizo las fronteras.
earth and the human beings made borders. Based upon this position, history has been made up
Jesús
of migrations, Abraham, Exodus, Jesus himself. Jesus migrated based on violence. There was violence. Violence forced Jesus' fathers, mother and father to migrate.
ya lo plantearon ustedes,
So
y es que
based on what you both have said, I wanted to add
la situación por la cual nuestra población
the situation that leads our population to migrate is basically to find better living conditions. It's not really the American dream, because we know that it's a nightmare, the nightmare of Latin Americans who migrate to the United States. But we also argue that we are countries, Central American countries. We're not just the Northern Triangle. That is not our concept. The Northern Triangle is not our concept. This is something that they have put upon us, and it hurts because it divides us. If we're the Northern Triangle, then there's a Southern Triangle, but there is none. We don't want to be divided this way. Costa Ricans migrate to Europe, and Nicaraguans migrate where? To Costa Rica. So the causes Salvadorans migrate: lack of employment, violence, psychological violence, physical violence. But above all, a different kind of violence.
Your volume is kind of down. I don't know if you can. Okay, can you try it again, Blanca, please? Still down. Very little.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I didn't touch anything. What happened? Shall we continue? I can hear fine.
Something that we can do to improve the sound with Reverend Blanca Irma.
I wasn't hearing it on her because I was listening to the translation. Maybe she should try to unplug her headphones and plug it back in again. Sometimes that works.
No, still is very. Try to unplug the mic and then plug it back.
Que hacer algo aquí,
Oh, okay, now we're hearing you.
¿Está mejor?
Yes.
Okay.
Way
Is
much
that better?
I'm sorry about the interruption.
Continúo. Voy a intentar retomar. Disculpa. Entonces les comentaba.
So I'll try to continue. I was commenting what is, in fact, what our people are looking for in the North. First, they want a better quality of life because the situation has led them to that. They're also looking for safety and security based on the situation created by violence, and also the people are looking to improve their social economic situation. On the other hand, migrating is not a crime. So the question is, why people have to live such terrible situations of violence and having their rights been written over. For example, excessive payments for moving, being robbed along the route, being discriminated against, being exposed to sexual abuses and physical violence. The long list of things that migrants deal with, but migrants continue to have the same rights as human beings as they had before they migrated. And they suffer these things only because they have the need to migrate. We want to be clear. We're talking about people who are forced to migrate based on an irregular migration. And irregular migration is only done by people who are living through situations of poverty. Now, why do we think that migration will not end? This is a problem that arrived to stay. Here we think no government is interested in ending the migration issue, though they may say they are. Through any of their institutions, for many reasons. First off, the countries that people are leaving from need the people to leave. First off, because they need the remittances, because the remittances have been a pillar of the economy of these countries. On the other hand, also the United States needs migrants because the US needs cheap labor. But there's another fact. In the migrant movement, there's many things happening. In the disorder, there's many things going on and there's no control. And because there's no control, we're not able to find out an accurate calculation of what's going on. And so in all of these comings and goings of human beings, there's arms moving, there's drugs moving, there's capital moving, there's human trafficking taking place. But because it's something that's thought of as uncontrollable, there is no accurate stats. But who are the affected people? Poor people. Are those that benefit the most? We already know, right? The rich, the powerful, those who control capital, transnational companies, and governments themselves. Banks. The banks profit from remittances, remember. So in El Salvador, we have a different situation, which is that the government has created a state of emergency with the idea of controlling the gangs and organized crime. According to statistics, at this point, we have more than 29,000 people arrested who have been put into jail, adding to the inmates who are already behind bars, so we can have an idea of what conditions these people are living in. And because we're in a state of emergency, there are no rights until the state of emergency is lifted. This could happen for only 1 month, but it's already been a while. So now I would like to talk about what we can do together. And here I want to share a few things. One, work on lobbying together, but we can't do that by ourselves. To do that, we have to get organized, unite ourselves, strengthen ourselves, build networks. We now
Por ejemplo,
participate in
pertenecemos a la mesa del
some networks.
desplazamiento interno forzado, donde estamos ahí
We have a table of internal displaced
con el tema del
people,
desplazamiento.
round table in our country, where we do political lobbying, but we also participate in another network, which is called The Country is Our Cause. We're also part of the network Amparo, which is of the Lutheran Church in Latin America. We also belong
¿De ustedes les suena?
to the network Convida 20, Convida 20,
A causa de la
which was created in 2020
pandemia.
based upon the pandemic. And we're working and strengthening ourselves. So it's important to mention. But I think it's also important to mention that we can work on
de participar con el apoyo al fortalecimiento de pequeños emprendimientos.
I think that where we can really strengthen ourselves is this issue of how
de origen
to
de las migraciones.
strengthen our small scale businesses. How do we support one another in creating an environment for small scale businesses? We need to create good campaigns, international campaigns of consciousness raising, of adding to sensibilities and to prevent migration based on what everyone else has said already. So I think that we need to start to work on this strategy based on the initiative of projects that Nancy mentioned. If we were able to develop these initiatives of people to open their small businesses, because these are the opportunities that people are looking for, that they need. How beautiful would it be?
Toda su vida esperando. Creo de que sería
Because that's what
muy,
people have been looking for their whole lives. The last thing I'd like to add.
El doctor Castaneda hablaba del rol que podemos tener las iglesias.
Dr. Castaneda talked about the role that our churches can have and that it's necessary that we take on. And I think that we together, I think it has its risks, but we would have to think about it, is what can be done with this network of coyotes. Because for me, one thing is the institutional situation. Everything having to do with public policy, but another thing is this violence, this violation of rights that coyotes do. One human being hurting another human being is someone other whose only crime has been to look for a better future for themselves in a land that isn't theirs. I can't imagine what we can do for now, but yes, I do believe that we can do a campaign to sensibilize, to humanize those who are working on human trafficking. Thank you so much. And I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Pastor Blanca Irma Rodriguez. And I think that you have stated some very important challenges regarding how can we work on public advocacy through networks, existing networks, new networks throughout the region, and to how to connect those networks with existing networks in the US. And that is something that I have been sharing with some of my colleagues at Global Ministries and some other people. Sometimes migration is seen as too much of a US situation, you know, north of the border. And I think that it is important to also look for the south of the border issues and how to connect the southern experience with the northern experience regarding migration, so we can work throughout the flow of migrants between Central America and the US, and how to strengthen those networks for the solidarity of migrants. Also, this initiative of small enterprises by people in communities that has been experienced in Honduras and also in Guatemala. How can we continue developing those economic initiatives so the people can have enough opportunities to stay in their countries and to live within their culture, their family, and their cultural identity. Also, the global awareness on migration. How can we continue expanding the issues of migration so we can share and hear stories and experiences from migrants from other places throughout the world, so we can continue building solidarity, a global solidarity among migrants. And some very important matter is how to deal with the coyotes, how to deal with that group of people who has been causing so much damage, killings and injustice within borders. So let me pass then to some questions or comments that I have been receiving. The first one, I am checking the chat at this moment because I think the ones that are in the chat are kind of older than the ones that are in the Q&A function. And Barbara Clark asked, what are the U.S. churches, the churches that are part of the Ecumenical Council that are U.S. partners in the U.S. And I have to tell to this question, all of them, because the Ecumenical Council of Guatemala has within its membership Episcopal, Presbyterians, Catholic, Lutherans, and even churches with some disciples background. So the project is designed for us to be in solidarity with all of those churches, and all of those churches are considered Global Ministries partners through the Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala. That is the idea, to work with all of them as they are part with the Ecumenical Christian Council of Guatemala. There was another question or some comment, long-term tragedy, the tragedy of the migrants parallel to the Uvalde tragedy yesterday. God bless your servanthood, says Thomas Blossom, and all of us who can support this work with prayers and substance. Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much, Barbara, for your greetings and your question. Greg Hill asks if U.S. homeless shelters help refugees, and the answer to this question is yes. We have been into some communities in the U.S. and we have seen how homeless shelters could also have refugees among them. And that is something that I have seen in the U.S. and also in Latin America, how they combine the work with homeless people, with migrant people throughout countries like Guatemala, like Honduras, and also in Tijuana in Mexico. I have seen homeless shelters who also work with refugees. So some other comments. Sharon Stanley says, Amen, Pastora, migration is not a crime. Seeking asylum is a human right which humanitarian laws guarantee. Thank you, Sharon. I also want to say hi to Irene Hassan, that is the UCC director of the migrant program from the United Church of Christ. Thank you, Irene, for being here. And also, I continue checking and seeing some other questions. I am here, okay, now in the Q&A function. How can new businesses be supported and protected from gangs? Oh, that's a very interesting question that I want to share with our friends from Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala. How can these new businesses be supported and even protected from gangs? Do you have any answer to that question, please? Is it complicated, Pastor Hector?
No. Podemos mentir y
We
podemos
can lie or we can hide the reality, but it's not the truth. But if in our country there is no professional and honest police force, many times, in order not to say every time, the police are associated with the gangs. It's a big business, very big business. The people, they are living under the thumb of these criminals. It's complete helplessness. It's helplessness that reaches desperation, but this is the reality.
I don't know, Nancy or Blanca Irma, if you have some idea on how to answer to that question, if you have had some experience dealing specifically with maras in your country and how to deal with them, you know.
Bueno, vamos a intentar. La respuesta
We're gonna try. The answer is not easy, but I believe it's not something we can guarantee. But I think this goes through the building wheels, like a political wheel, the construction of a good strategy to control the gangs, how to control the gangs and how to prevent these levels of corruption, because this happens because of how corrupt the institutions are. And corruption comes at every single level. And until this is not eliminated, then it's very, very difficult to even think of having a control of the gangs or that the new businesses are going to be free of extortion.
Yeah, please, Nancy.
Sí, gracias. Totalmente de acuerdo.
I am completely in agreement with my partners. We cannot guarantee security in these countries. Dr. Castañeda says something very important. Many times, the heads of the gangs are the police officers, are the people in the police. If somebody goes and puts a complaint with the police, the gangs within minutes know who spoke against them. So it's difficult in our countries, and people are afraid to even go to the police. There are special programs here to deal with extortion, but people, because they are afraid, they do not complain, they do not say anything. And many have been killed, they've been murdered for speaking out against the gangs or for certain or for any criminal. And we cannot say that we can keep them safe, or like if people want to build a business, they want to start something new, there is no way we can guarantee that they will not be blackmailed.
I remember some initiative by the Salvadorian Lutheran Synod regarding an open dialogue with gangs, with maras, how to maybe to negotiate with them or to look for some alternative ways. I remember Bishop Medardo Gomez working actively with some pastors to try to get into some agreement with those gang members, and even the actual president of El Salvador advertised himself as somebody who could deal with those gangs, and now we're seeing this state of exception in the country. So, but we recognize that it is a very difficult circumstance, and how to deal advocating for the rights of people and the rights of protection for the people is a way difficult thing to do at this moment. So there is no answer. I think that the answer should be looked together to continue our reflection and our work within our communities. Thank you very much for that question. And I am trying here to see the question from Tom Haynes. Hi, Tom. Very nice to have you here in the forum. What changes in U.S. policy should U.S. churches be advocating? That's a question from our brother Tom Haynes. For us, what changes in U.S. policy should U.S. churches be advocating? Please, if you can answer that question, people, I will appreciate it. Hector, you need to turn on your mic.
La pregunta es, ¿qué política?
The question is what public policy from the US needs to change in relation to migration?
Bueno, en el Congreso está
in the US Congress, for many years, there's this famous migrant reform that no one has dared touch. Maybe a bit Reagan did. And since then, it's just been there. And I think it's important to recognize this. If the United States had a migration law that focused on every single angle of the people who are already there, and like Blanca said, and if the US would regularize migrants and it wasn't this chaos and these hidden lives, it would be a great help. And well, yes, US analysts, they ask themselves, why is Congress not moving through with this? Imagine us down here. We do not understand it. But this is something that could help, that could make things easier, that could help solve irregular migration, like Blanca spoke about, about the migration from our countries towards them. There should be an orderly project that does not discriminate, because it's the truth. Here in our countries, very few very privileged people can migrate to the US, but the largest majority, they are not privileged. And I think it would be a big step. And I think we need to consider the churches that have worked in this reality. For US Congress and the US government to consider the experiences of the US churches that have worked with the painful reality of migration, at least in our three countries.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Pastor Blancaima or Sister Nancy, if you have anything to add into this matter, U.S. policies that you would tell our U.S. friends
solamente
to change. Yeah.
Perdón.
No, go ahead.
Solamente sumarle un poco a lo que dice el pastor.
I would just like to add to what the Pastor Castañeda was saying. The support that migration reform would give to the countries from the Northern Triangle, like Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala. In Honduras, the economy, the main income of Honduras are the money sent from the migrants, from all the Hondurans who left to the US. So what what would happen if the US decides to deport all of these people? Imagine if we already live in extreme poverty, how would our economy even be if everyone would be sent back and all this support just ended? Especially given that these people have no support from the US government. Can you even imagine how can we live? How can we get by, including myself, who I have family in the US? I receive the support, I receive this money because the situation and the crisis in Honduras has only gotten worse. So what would happen with Honduran families? Today they live with $2 a day. Imagine what the situation would be then.
Yes, and it is also so curious that while human flows are so much prohibited or limited, how capital flows doesn't have the same destiny. How the US and countries from the so-called first world are constantly exporting their capitals and creating a financial casino around the world. But in terms of labor, they retain the opportunities for other people to participate into the US economy. So maybe solutions can be as simple as a work permit, as to promote working permits for migrants, so they could cross the border, work in the US, return at night at their homes in Mexico or Central America, or having people working for I don't know, for seasonal workers, legally working in the US and returning to their homelands. I don't know. I think that we need to continue working on alternatives. Pastor Blancaima, you were about to say something, please.
Bien, ¿puedo?
Yes, please.
Bueno, yo lo veo si realmente
The
Estados
way
Unidos quisiera.
I see it, if the US actually wanted and had the political will
No evitar totalmente, pero
to not just stop migration flows, but to lower the migration flows, they could do two things. First, what my partner said, Nancy,
el reverendo Ángel
and
es una política
we're talking
migratoria
about
laboral temporal
political
para tener
reform or temporary workers,
no tengan necesidad de irse de forma
so that
indefinida,
people
sí,
do not have the need to live
que después pudieran
forever,
regresar a su
but that can go throughout the seasons. That is one. The other one is to create projects, programs, national development programs, like real development programs that is adjusted to the needs and the conditions of each country, of each of our country, not with an imported technology, but with actually developing our countries, but that also guarantees a strategy to guarantee that the funds, whatever much they are, but that these funds arrive and get to the hands of the communities, and not that it's just sent. Not that they sent 50 million and we only get $500,000. And I think if the United States had any political will, they could do these things.
Most of the aid provided by the United States, as well as for European agencies, is invested in salaries for foreign people working in our countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the product of those salaries as paid for those technicians and people working in the countries return back to the US for the families of those experts that are working for in our countries in Latin America. So those funds do not necessarily are invested in the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. They come as salaries, but then the worker, the US worker in Latin America, return those funds to their families in the US. So it is also important for us to know how important is what you're saying, Pastor Blanca Irma, that those funds need to stay and to be invested in the countries in Latin America so the economies could then flourish as a result of those funds. Okay, let us stop here because the United Church of Christ has some announcements to share with us regarding their upcoming program. So please, Becca, if you can share with us the upcoming webinars and meetings, please.
Yes, thank you, Angel. So next week, as part of the United Church of Christ's Wednesdays with the World webinar series, we will be having an Refugee Sunday ecumenical worship service. So it's particularly relevant for all of you interested in this issue. I invite you to join us next Wednesday, June 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern for, again, a World Refugee Day ecumenical worship service that is in coordination with the UCC, the Disciples, the Presbyterian Church USA, and the Mennonite Central Committee. So we invite you to join us for that next week. That is all that is upcoming in terms of virtual offerings. Angel, that is it.
Thank you very much, Becca, and we are very pleased to greet everybody who has been with us throughout this hour and a half. I want to especially say hi to Melba Vitorino, who is always one of our greatest supporters in the work of Global Ministries, present in almost every virtual pilgrimage. You know, we know that we can count on you, Melba. Thank you very much, and thank you, Greg, Julie, Gerald, Nancy, Ruth, Tom Haynes, Thomas, and all of the people who have been with us. Also, Brian Alvarado, the Executive Director of the Ecumenical Council, Christian Council of Guatemala, who has been with us, and also Rafael Menjivar, the Director of Communications of the Salvadorian Lutheran Synod, who also was a key part of organizing this presentation by our partners. So we are very delighted of this opportunity. Let us continue thinking, let us continue reflecting, let us continue acting and being in solidarity with our friends in Central America, specifically with financial opportunities, especially building networks, especially trying to communicate between North and South so we can be in the same page regarding migration policies. We need each other. Maybe migration is the perfect storm for the people who are in power. US maybe could need cheap labor and Central America could need remittances, but how can we change that scene so justice could be lived in the countries in Central America as well as in the people in the US. So thank you very much, and let us end with a word of prayer to end this workshop about the country, the Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Let us have a word of prayer. Señor Dios, gracias por esta oportunidad de compartir solidaridad, de compartir.
Thank you for this opportunity to share your spirit in solidarity, to share the desire to walk in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. I ask for a blessing, Lord, for the Ecumenical Council of Guatemala, as well as for our friends in El Salvador, and the Development Christian Council, and all of our other groups in these three countries. They have shown your mercy, your peace, your hope.
All of the good news that we hear from our partners, and also to share those good news within our churches. And please continue giving us the wisdom and the discernment to best accompany them in their realities in those countries that we love so much. Thank you for all of the people that have been gathering here through this hour and a half. Bless them and continue with all of us as we continue in this ministry, in this challenging ministry of building the realm of God within us. Thank you very much, dear Lord, and it's in the name of Jesus Christ that we pray. Amen. Muchísimas gracias. Blessings. Take care, and it has been a pleasure. We continue serving through Global Ministries. So thank you very much for being with us, and the peace of God be with you. Que la paz del Señor esté con todos y con todas ustedes. Héctor, Blanca Irma, Nancy, gracias. Dios les bendiga. Take care.